I don't hold grudges. Let's just knuckle up and get it over with. I don't want no trouble. If something got to go down, I'm not playing fair.
In NBA history, few names shine as brightly in glory while sinking as deeply in controversy as Karl Malone. They called him the Mailman, the one who always delivers, because for nearly 2 decades he scored relentlessly, consistently, and with machine-like endurance. 2-time MVP, 14-time All-Star, more than 36,000 points, a tally surpassed only by the game's immortal legends. Alongside John Stockton, he formed the most effective pick-and-roll duo ever, carrying the Utah Jazz to the very brink of a championship. But the NBA ring, the ultimate symbol of a career, forever eluded him. Behind that glory, however, lies a reality drenched in shadows. No longer the star with iron muscles and a piercing glare, but a man scarred by poverty-stricken beginnings and personal scandals that haunted his legacy. A relationship with a 13-year-old girl, abandoned children born out of wedlock, and public conflicts that enraged fans. A sporting icon, yet also a man who repeatedly failed in his roles as father, husband, and, in many ways, as a human being. A sports monument, but also a man marked by too many scars. Karl Malone. Basketball genius or personal tragedy? The answer can only be found in the paradoxical journey of his life. Karl Malone was born on July 24, 1963, in Summerfield, a tiny town in northern Louisiana, where life revolved around pine forests, dusty farms, and the sharp scent of sawdust from the local mill. He was the youngest of 9 children, a position that left him both sheltered and easily overlooked in a crowded household with too many mouths to feed and no father figure. Malone's father, Shedrick Hay, abandoned the family to start a new life elsewhere before Karl even had a chance to understand what fatherhood meant. That man became nothing more than a fleeting shadow in memory, leaving his mother, Shirley Malone, to shoulder the weight of raising all the children alone. But the tragedy didn't end there. When Karl was just 3 years old, his father took his own life. No explanation, no farewell, only a cold emptiness that the child could never fill. Malone buried that pain so deeply that it wasn't until 1994, already an NBA superstar, that he finally admitted it to the world. From then on, the small, resilient woman named Shirley became his only anchor. She did every kind of work to keep her family afloat. At the lumber mill during the day, odd jobs in the evening, and cooking at dawn before facing another day. She refused government assistance, clinging fiercely to the family's dignity. Though she lived in hardship, she never let her children drown in hunger or shame. She took them to church for spiritual refuge, out to the river to fish for meals, and into the woods to hunt and learn survival. And when she couldn't afford a basketball hoop, she formed a circle with her hands so her youngest son could practice shooting. From those days, Karl Malone learned a harsh discipline: work until exhaustion and never complain. The skinny boy toughened into a sturdy teenager through long hours chopping wood, plowing fields, riding hogs, and playing ball under the scorching southern sun. His older brothers often tossed him into rough wrestling matches in the yard, teaching him the hard truth that to stand tall, he had to take hits. That gritty dirt basketball style forged the aggressive, muscular, no-nonsense game that the NBA would later fear. At Summerfield High School, Karl Malone quickly became the pride of his small town. His team was a no-name contender in Class C competition, where many schools lacked proper gymnasiums. Some played on creaking wooden floors. Others nailed a backboard onto a tree trunk. Yet in that poverty-stricken setting, Malone led Summerfield to 3 straight state championships, a feat almost unimaginable for such a small, overlooked school. It was here that his raw strength, toughness, and mud basketball style truly began to take shape. But success on the court wasn't enough to unlock his future. Malone hit a wall with his poor academics. Despite his talent, many universities turned him down, including the Arkansas Razorbacks, who once had their eye on him but withdrew due to NCAA eligibility concerns. With few options left, Malone stayed close to home and chose Louisiana Tech, a decision that would later prove life-changing. Even then, obstacles persisted. In his first year, Malone was ruled ineligible due to low grades and was forced to sit out the entire season. He could only watch from the sidelines, powerless as his teammates competed. Yet instead of giving up, Malone turned frustration into fuel. He trained relentlessly, using the work ethic he had built on the farm as his edge. By his sophomore year, he erupted. Averaging 18 points and 9 rebounds per game, Malone became the team's brightest star, carrying Louisiana Tech to its first-ever NCAA tournament appearance and all the way to the Sweet 16. It wasn't just an achievement. It was proof that the boy once dismissed for his grades had found another way to assert himself through sheer willpower and sweat. From a poor child without a father, Malone learned to turn pain into strength, scarcity into determination. Yet the irony was this: the very absence of a father that haunted his childhood would later cast its shadow on how he faced his own children. In 1985, after 3 seasons at Louisiana Tech, Karl Malone declared for the NBA draft. He had the physique and the powerful playing style, but coming from a small school and still raw on defense, he wasn't rated highly. The Utah Jazz selected him 13th overall in the first round, an unremarkable number for a player destined to become one of the greats. But that seemingly modest pick turned into fate itself, marking the beginning of the journey that would transform the Mailman into an NBA legend. The 13th pick in the first round of the draft wasn't bad, but it wasn't enough to make anyone believe he would become a superstar. At the time, the Utah Jazz were only a middling team, with little star power and rarely any attention from the national media. Yet in his rookie season, Malone made an immediate impact. Averaging more than 14 points and 8 rebounds per game, he quickly proved that the raw power forged from years of farm labor could overwhelm NBA giants. Malone's game was not flashy, not showy, but every shot, every rebound was delivered with full force. Utah fans began calling him the Mailman because every night he delivered on time. Steady, reliable, unstoppable. By his second year, Malone exploded. He became the Jazz's leading scorer, surpassing even veteran teammates. Averaging over 20 points per game, Malone not only secured his place on the team, but also laid the foundation for the franchise's future. His powerful drives to the rim, his bruising post play, these made him a nightmare in the paint. Karl Malone's career cannot be told without another name: John Stockton. If Malone was the muscle, the man who always delivered, Stockton was the brain, a passing machine that never stopped. One delivered razor-sharp passes, the other finished with sledgehammer strength. Together, they created a weapon so simple that everyone knew what was coming, yet almost no one could stop it: the pick and roll. Fans called it the NBA's most familiar dance. Every time Stockton brought the ball across half court, the arena seemed to hold its breath. One screen from Malone, the ball bounced back, and the outcome was set. An open jumper, a thunderous dunk, or a one-on-one battle at the rim. Simple, direct, brutally effective, and repeated thousands of times over nearly 2 decades. The Stockton-Malone duo became the model of enduring partnership in sports. 2 contrasting personalities fused into one rhythm, one disciplined, one explosive, one quiet, one fierce, together elevating the Utah Jazz from obscurity into a true Western Conference powerhouse. The peak of Stockton-Malone came in the late 1990s, when the Utah Jazz finally reached the biggest stage, the NBA Finals in 1997 and 1998. By then, Malone had already won 2 MVP awards and was regarded as an unstoppable force in the paint. Waiting for him was no smaller opponent: Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, the most dominant dynasty in NBA history. Those finals weren't just games, they were battles of will and fate. In 1997, the Jazz shocked the world by winning 2 games against the Bulls, pushing the series into a tie. Salt Lake City erupted in joy. faith spreading through streets more accustomed to mountain quiet. For the people of Utah, who had never tasted basketball glory, it seemed the impossible was within reach. But fate cracked the dream in Game 1. In the tense final seconds before Malone's free throws, Scottie Pippen walked over and whispered coldly, "The mailman doesn't deliver on Sundays." The crowd froze. Malone, nicknamed the mailman for his reliability, missed both crucial free throws. Utah lost the opener, a wound that cut deep into the psyche. Then came Game 5, with an even crueler twist. Michael Jordan, feverish and nearly collapsing, the game later immortalized as the flu game, still forced himself onto the court. His body trembled, drenched in sweat, yet when the ball reached his hands, Jordan buried the decisive three-pointer in the closing seconds. The ball ripped through the net, extinguishing all hope. The Bulls triumphed, the arena roared like thunder, and Malone could only stare at the scoreboard, listening to the victorious roar of his rivals. 1 year later, summer of 1998, the rematch arrived. The Utah Jazz, still anchored by Malone and Stockton, once again conquered the West to reach the finals. Fans believed that after the heartbreak of 1997, this time the Jazz were ready to rewrite history. Malone entered the series with every ounce of strength, carrying the burning hopes of a small city dreaming of glory. But destiny, almost mocking, had another cruel twist prepared. Game 6 in Salt Lake City, the air itself seemed heavy with tension. The Jazz traded blows with the Bulls, and in the final minutes, the arena shook as Utah pulled ahead. The people of Utah felt as if the Larry O'Brien Trophy was just within reach. Then, the moment of fate. Malone had the ball in the low post, his sacred territory. But from behind, Michael Jordan crept in, stealing the ball in stunned silence. Jordan dribbled forward, time seeming to slow, then stopped and rose for a jumper over Brian Russell. The ball arced through the air, sank into the hoop before the buzzer sounded. The world remembers it as the last shot. For Jordan, it was the perfect closing act to an immortal dynasty, his 6th championship with the Bulls. For Karl Malone, it was the end of a lifelong dream. He stood frozen on the court, eyes refusing to believe the scoreboard. All the strength, the effort, the sweat and wounds erased in a single shot from the man across him. Many regard it as the greatest tragedy of Malone's career. A superstar who ruled the paint, who twice carried a small market team to heaven's door, only to be denied by destiny both times. Malone would never win a championship ring. Yet those two heartbreaking defeats etched his name into history in another way, immortal in memory. Not everyone defeats Jordan, but few ever earned Jordan's respect. Few ever forced him to give everything, like Karl Malone did. And sometimes it is not victory, but defeat. With its torment, its haunting weight, and its tragic beauty that makes a legend truly unforgettable in the hearts of fans. After the crushing fall of 1998, many believed Karl Malone would slowly fade from the spotlight. But the truth was different. The 1999 season opened after a chaotic lockout, and Malone, at 36, still carried the physique of a warrior fresh from the weight room. Averaging over 23 points and 9 rebounds per game, he pushed the Jazz deep into the playoffs, only to be eliminated by the Portland Trail Blazers. The following years felt like déjà vu. Malone still put up more than 20 points a night, still made the All-Star team, still struck fear in the paint. But the youth and speed of rising powers, especially the Los Angeles Lakers with Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, stripped Utah of its status as a true contender. Time moved forward, and the Jazz grew older. John Stockton, his partner in crime for 18 seasons, was also reaching the end of the road. They still reached the playoffs, still gave Salt Lake unforgettable moments, but every time they met fresher, faster opponents, the dream shattered in the early rounds. Malone never hid his disappointment, yet he refused to surrender. At 37, 38, and even 39, he still averaged over 20 points per game, still took the court with the same cold, determined stare. Across the league, he was hailed as the symbol of endurance. In 2003, the inevitable arrived. John Stockton announced his retirement, closing the book on the greatest pick-and-roll duo in history. Malone, now 40, faced the hardest choice of his career: stay in Utah and end quietly, or chase one last chance, the chance to finally win the championship ring fate had long denied him. Malone chose the latter. After 18 seasons with the Utah Jazz, he made a bold move, joining the Los Angeles Lakers. It was no longer the choice of a loyal soldier, but the final gamble of a legend desperate for a title. And the Lakers at that time were nothing short of a dream super team. Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, Gary Payton, and now Karl Malone. The NBA shook. The world believed the Mailman would finally deliver to the summit of glory. For much of that season, it seemed within reach. Even at 40, Malone brought toughness and veteran wisdom to the Lakers. He willingly sacrificed his star role to blend into the team, focusing on one goal alone: the ring that had eluded him his entire career. But destiny once again turned away. A knee injury crippled Malone, leaving him a shadow of himself by the finals. And in the 2004 NBA Finals, the Lakers collapsed against the Detroit Pistons, a team without flash, but with machine-like discipline. When the final buzzer sounded, Michael Jordan was no longer there to deny him with the last shot. Yet the same bitter ending returned, the last chance slipping away. After that season, Karl Malone quietly announced his retirement. No championship ring, no grand farewell ceremony. He left the NBA with a title nobody wanted but nobody dared dispute: the ringless legend. A symbol of endurance, a warrior who fought until the very end, but who never claimed the ultimate prize. And perhaps it is that incompleteness that makes the name Karl Malone linger hauntingly in the memory of fans. Under the bright lights of the NBA, Karl Malone was the Mailman, the man who always delivered. But when the curtain fell, behind the glory lay another truth: youthful mistakes that left scars for a lifetime. At 20 years old, as a sophomore at Louisiana Tech, Karl Malone made the greatest mistake of his life. He became involved with Gloria Bell, a girl who was only 13 years old. The result was the birth of a son, Demetrius Bell, in 1984. By law, Malone should have faced serious consequences, as this was a criminal act. But Summerfield was a small town where everyone knew each other, and Gloria's family chose silence. They believed that if Malone succeeded, the child would one day benefit from his financial support. Silence, however, could not last forever. By 1986, Malone was already in his second NBA season, earning millions from salary and endorsements. Gloria's parents had no choice but to take him to court, demanding that he take responsibility for his child. Instead of accepting, Malone fought back fiercely. The court ultimately ordered him to pay $125 per week plus medical expenses for the boy, a sum so trivial it was almost mocking compared to Malone's wealth. But what outraged the public wasn't the money, it was his cold refusal, a rising star turning his back on his own blood. For a decade, Malone denied it. Only in 1996, when a DNA test was conducted, was the truth officially sealed. Malone was Demetrius's father with 99% certainty. Yet rather than open his heart, he slammed the door once more. When he met his son for the first time, Malone coldly said, "It's too late for me to be your father." The words cut like a knife, severing what little hope the boy had. Demetrius grew up in that void. He once bitterly told the press, "I just considered my mom went to a sperm bank. I don't hate him, but he was never there." It wasn't resentment so much as a chilling acceptance that he had grown up without a father. Even so, Demetrius refused to let the pain consume him. He pursued sports, played for the Buffalo Bills, and spent 5 seasons in the NFL, building a life of his own, never expecting recognition from the father who denied him. Only when Malone reached his later years did time open a narrow door. From 2014, their relationship began to mend. By 2018, they were seen hunting and fishing together. Simple moments Demetrius had long yearned for in his childhood. Malone admitted his mistake, confessing that time is the greatest thief, stealing away his chance to be a real father. Yet even that heartfelt admission came too late. Some voids cannot be filled, not by 100 fishing trips, nor 1,000 days spent together in the woods. But Demetrius Bell was not the only child Karl Malone once turned his back on. Earlier, while still in high school, Malone had a girlfriend named Bonita Ford. At 17, the two had twins together, Daryl and Cheryl. Instead of acknowledging them, Malone chose denial, maintaining silence for years. In 1989, the case was taken to court, yet he still stubbornly refused responsibility. It wasn't until 1998, when a tabloid exposed the truth, that Malone was forced to face it. For the first time, he met the two children he had abandoned for 17 years. By then, Cheryl had already become a rising basketball talent, while Daryl was also pursuing the sport at the collegiate level. Rather than holding grudges, both welcomed their father, hoping to mend the gap of the past. Cheryl would later become a WNBA star, winning 3 championships, making 4 All-Star appearances, and leaving a shining mark in women's basketball history. Daryl never reached his sister's heights, but he too proved that the athletic bloodline of the Malone family never dimmed. Yet the shadows of Malone's private life did not end there. In 2004, he became embroiled in a controversy when rumors spread that he had made flirtatious remarks toward Vanessa, Kobe Bryant's wife and Malone's teammate's spouse. Kobe was furious, and the relationship between the two stars fractured in the middle of the season. For a legend nearing the twilight of his career, it was yet another blemish on an image already scarred. Here lies a moral paradox difficult to dismiss. Malone grew up in the pain of being abandoned by his own father, witnessing his family torn apart when he was just 3 years old. And yet, he repeated the same tragic cycle with his own children. It was not just a stain on his biography, but a cold reflection of the man behind the spotlight. Only when his hair had turned gray and his strength waned did Malone offer a belated confession. "I was wrong. Father Time is the greatest thief, one you can never reclaim." He could score tens of thousands of points in his career, but he could never make up for the years lost with his children. And while his name is etched into NBA history, behind it remains a moral scar, a haunting question. Was Karl Malone only a legend on the court, but a failure as a father? Amid scandals and a blazing career, Karl Malone found what seemed like a calm harbor, Kay Kinsey. A young woman from Idaho Falls with Filipino and American heritage, she had been crowned Miss Idaho USA in 1988. Unlike many women drawn to NBA stardom, Kay did not come to Malone for his fame. They met at a book signing in Salt Lake City that year, when Malone was still at the height of his career. What impressed Malone most was not Kay's beauty, but her innocence. She didn't even realize he was a basketball star. It was one of the rare moments when he wasn't seen as the mailman, but simply as Karl, a regular man. 2 years later, on Christmas Eve 1990, they were married. The wedding was modest by NBA standards, but for Malone, it marked something significant. For the first time, he chose to build a legitimate family instead of running from responsibility. After marriage, Kay left modeling behind and turned to business, managing restaurants, ice cream ventures, and becoming Malone's steady partner in both life and career. Together, they had 4 children: KD, Kylie, Carl Jr., KJ, and Carly. To the public, the Malone family seemed ideal. A powerful NBA star, a beautiful former pageant queen, and children growing up in comfort. But behind closed doors, things weren't always peaceful. Kay had to live under the shadow of her husband's past. The lawsuits over paternity, the children born out of wedlock, the painful tabloid headlines. Sometimes Malone's silence in front of the press made those wounds in their marriage even harder to bear. Conflict came not only from the past, but also from the present. The 2004 incident, when Malone was rumored to have flirted with Vanessa Bryant, not only fractured his relationship with Kobe on the Lakers, but also deeply hurt Kay. Being the wife of an NBA legend meant learning to endure the spotlight, the constant presence of other women, and the never-ending rumors. But Kay Kinsey was not a weak woman. She chose to stay, not for fame or money, but because she believed that, after everything, Malone was still the man she could spend her life with. She stood by him through his hardest times, when he left the Jazz in bitterness, when he retired without ever touching a championship ring, and when the children from his past showed up at their door. At times, their marriage was pulled tight like a stretched string, but it never broke. Today, looking back, Kay and Karl Malone have shared over 3 decades together. Their children are grown, with families of their own, while the couple now live quietly on a ranch in Louisiana. For Kay, happiness doesn't lie in being the wife of a legend, but in keeping her family intact through every storm. For Karl, it is a quiet redemption. After abandoning so many, at least he did not abandon this woman. While most NBA stars retire to Hollywood or big cities to bask in late glory, Karl Malone returned to Louisiana, the land that raised him with mud, pine, and sawdust. There, he built his own world, a 454-acre ranch. Open fields stretch wide, pine forests link to rivers, sturdy horse barns stand tall, and at the center lies a massive wooden lodge with 5 fireplaces always burning. The place radiates both the luxury of a millionaire and the raw grit of a man who once came out of hardship. Malone's days on the ranch are not so different from his childhood. He rises early to feed the livestock, spends afternoons riding his ATV along the riverbanks, and gathers in the evenings with Kay Kinsey and their grandchildren by the crackling fire. He still hunts and fishes, lifelong passions, as if every arrow and every cast is a way of extending the memory of the boy from Summerfield. Here, he is no longer the NBA's mailman, but simply Karl, a Southern man tied to land and family. Yet Louisiana is only half his life. When winter comes, Malone retreats to his mansion in Alaska, a place in stark contrast. Stone walls rise strong, ceilings stretch high, firelight dances on sparkling green quartz. Outside, snow blankets the ground, and the night sky glows with the northern lights. It is no longer a world of trumpets and flashbulbs, but a haven of silence where a man who has seen glory and turmoil can sit and reflect. Even Malone's garage tells his story. No flashy supercars, no Ferraris or Lamborghinis like many sports stars. Instead, machines that mirror his character. A Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat roaring with the same ferocity he once brought to the paint. A Toyota Tundra, sturdy and dependable like the shoulders that carried the Utah Jazz for nearly 2 decades. A Toyota Tacoma, smaller and nimbler, for roaming the woods with his grandkids on hunting trips, and most surprising of all, a Toyota Camry, modest and quiet, a mask that lets Malone blend into a crowd unnoticed. From his land, Malone built a business empire. He opened teriyaki grill restaurants, the Eskimos' frozen custard brand, and purchased Arby's and Burger King franchises. He expanded into the auto industry with Karl Malone Toyota in Ruston and Karl Malone Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Utah. At one point, he even co-owned a Honda dealership with John Stockton, as if extending the old two-man game into business. He also invested in the Jiffy Lube chain, believing that oil and machinery carried the same kind of enduring value as basketball fundamentals. His fortune is estimated at around $55 million, not loud, not boastful, but reflecting his life philosophy: wealth in silence, strength in substance. Today, Karl Malone chooses a quiet life. He is seen at church every Sunday, sometimes dropping by local schools to talk to students about discipline and perseverance, or simply bent over in the morning, scattering hay for his livestock. Friends say he is calmer now, more grateful, often speaking of God as his final anchor. The mailman who once struck fear with his sharp elbows has stepped back. To the world now, Malone is just a Southern man who has found peace, in the fields, in his family, and in whispered prayers. In NBA history, Karl Malone is always remembered with two faces. On one side stands the legend of the court, 19 seasons, 14 All-Star appearances, 2 MVP awards, more than 36,000 career points, second all-time when he retired. The mailman was the very definition of durability. Every night he stepped on the floor, he delivered with the same intensity, unfazed by age or injury. The Stockton-Malone duo remains an eternal symbol of efficiency and loyalty. Nearly 2 decades wearing the jersey of a small market team in Utah, turning the Jazz into a force the NBA could not ignore. But on the other side, Malone symbolizes an unfinished tragedy. He never once touched the championship ring. Twice he reached the finals, and twice Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls ended the dream, leaving behind painful memories, the missed free throws after Scottie Pippen's mocking words, and the iconic last shot when Jordan stole the ball right from his hands. Ironically, it was these very defeats that made Malone immortal in a different way. People remember him not only for victories but for fighting until the end, even when fate never stood on his side. Off the court, Malone's impact is just as layered in contradiction. He inspired with discipline, work ethic, and endurance, yet his personal scandals cast heavy shadows. The fact that he abandoned his own children became an indelible stain. To many, Malone represents a moral paradox. The boy who grew up fatherless, only to inflict the same pain on his own children. Only in his later years did he admit his failures with the haunting words, "I was wrong. Father time is the greatest thief, one you can never reclaim." Even so, his legacy is not defined solely by his mistakes or the missing championship ring. Karl Malone became a model of resilience and consistency, qualities generations of players have sought to emulate. Coaches still use his image to teach lessons in discipline, strength, and perseverance. In Utah, Malone remains etched in murals and collective memory, a lasting reminder of the brightest era the franchise ever knew. Karl Malone closed his career in paradox, one of the greatest players in history, but forever the legend without a ring. And yet, it is this very paradox that ensures his place as unforgettable, a basketball monument and a reminder that glory and shadow always walk together, and that sometimes failure makes a legend more immortal than victory. Karl Malone, a ringless icon, a man both great and deeply scarred. He entered NBA history as the mailman, who always delivered on the court but failed in the most personal deliveries of life. Fans remember him for the legendary pick and roll, but cannot forget the children he left behind. And perhaps that is the deepest haunting of all, because the question still echoes today. Was Karl Malone proof of extraordinary perseverance, or a reminder that no one, not even legends, can escape the shadows of their own making? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel as we continue to uncover real-life stories, where light and darkness always walk side by side on the path of the stars.